Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to talk about something called environmental site assessments. Now, this is the critical, kind of behind-the-scenes detective work that has to happen before any major property deal. And trust me, it can absolutely make or break the entire thing.
So let's just dive right in. When you buy a piece of property, you're not just buying the land and the building. You are buying its entire history. In this explainer, we're going to go on a 3-phase investigation to uncover the hidden environmental, legal, and, financial risks that could literally be lurking right under your feet.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the hidden risks in the land itself. Then, we'll walk through the 3 key phases of an assessment: the background check, digging for clues, and finally, the cleanup. And we'll wrap up with why this all matters so much for any project. Let's get into it.
Before anyone, a buyer, a seller, and especially a lender signs on the dotted line for a property, they have to do their homework. This whole process is called due diligence, and it's all about making sure you avoid some incredibly costly and frankly dangerous environmental surprises down the road.
And this is the official tool for that homework, the Environmental Site Assessment, or ESA for short. The best way to think of it is like a complete health checkup for a piece of land. It's designed to sniff out any contamination from things like old gas stations, factories, or, just improper waste disposal from decades ago.
So, we're officially kicking off our investigation with Phase 1. But what's really interesting here is that we don't put a single shovel in the ground. Not yet. This entire phase is pure detective work. It's all about research, observation, and interviews.
The word to really focus on here is potential. See, because this phase is non-intrusive, no soil gets disturbed, and no samples are taken. It is purely about gathering evidence to see if there's even a possibility of a problem on the site. This process is broken down into 4 key steps. And hey, for anyone out there studying for the architect exams, this is core knowledge for the PPD or Programming and Analysis section. You start by reviewing records, then you do a site visit, you conduct some interviews, and finally, you put it all together in a report. This is really the foundation of your site analysis.
That records review is exactly like digging through an old case file. Investigators are looking at land titles to see who owned the property and when. They're pulling up old aerial photos to see if, say, there was a suspicious-looking pond or maybe some storage tanks on the site 50 years ago. They even check old fire and drainage records for any red flags. So, where does this all lead? Well, if that Phase 1 detective work finds enough evidence to suggest there's a risk, and the official term for that is a recognized environmental condition, then the whole investigation escalates. We move from identifying potential problems to confirming if they're actual problems.
Okay, this is where the gloves come off and we get our hands dirty, literally. A Phase 2 assessment only gets triggered if Phase 1 raised some serious concerns, and its goal is pretty simple: find out if the suspicions are true.
Now, unlike Phase 1, this part is fully intrusive. This means bringing in drill rigs to strategically collect soil and groundwater samples. Those samples are then really carefully packaged up and sent off to an accredited lab for a full forensic analysis.
Now, the lab isn't just testing for everything under the sun. Based on that Phase 1 report, they have a list of suspects, which are known as contaminants of potential concern, or COPs. So, if the property used to be a dry cleaner, they'll look for specific cleaning solvents. If it was an old gas station, they're going to be testing for petroleum hydrocarbons.
And as you can probably imagine, this level of investigation comes with a much, much higher price tag. While a Phase 1 might cost a few $1,000s, a Phase 2 can easily run from $8,000 to well over $50,000, depending on how big the site is and how complex the problem might be. The financial stakes just get a whole lot higher right here.
So what happens if the lab results from Phase 2 come back positive? Well, if contamination is confirmed, our investigation moves into its final and most intensive stage, Phase 3. You can also call it remediation, or more simply, the cleanup.
But before you can clean anything up, you have to know the exact size and shape of the problem. That very first step is called delineation. It's where investigators drill even more holes to map out the precise horizontal and vertical extent of the contamination. They're basically drawing a 3D boundary around the entire mess.
Once the problem is all mapped out, experts create what's called a remediation action plan. For the architects listening, this is where project development and documentation, or PDD, really comes into play. This cleanup plan becomes a huge part of the project's documents, and it can totally impact site design and the construction schedule. This can be a really big deal.
So, after walking through all three phases, the background check, the forensic dig, and the massive cleanup, it's worth asking the most important question of all. Why go through all this trouble?
Well, it really just comes down to two simple things. First, and without a doubt, most importantly, human health. Contaminants in the ground can pose serious risks, exposing people to materials that cause long-term illness. This whole process is about making sure the land is safe for every single person who will use it.
And the second reason is just as critical: money. Contamination can make a property financially toxic. Lenders will not finance a contaminated site, which makes it pretty much impossible to buy or sell. The property's value essentially drops to zero until it's proven clean.
So this whole three-phase investigation is really an essential shield. It mitigates massive environmental, legal, and financial risk. But, beyond the dollars and cents of the transaction, it protects the long-term health of our natural environment and our communities.
So the next time you walk past an empty lot or a new development going up, just take a second. Every single piece of land has a history, and sometimes the most important parts of that story are buried just below the surface, just waiting to be discovered.